Good. Hello. Thanks for watching another Sunday case study. Today we're looking at Aaron Rodgers, the American football star. Now, I know really nothing about American football or about this chap altogether, really. I wanted to read the palms of Aaron Rodgers because I find his palms very interesting. Mostly, I discovered him because I looked up the top most searched for people on Google in 2024, and Aaron Rodgers was one of them. And I also wanted to I wanted to read the palms of someone who's a bit different. I've been reading the palms of actors, politicians. This chap, he is an athlete, and his palms will tell us very different things because we're looking at a very different person. Now, straight away, this person is a square hand, not to be confused with a square palm. He has a square palm, as we can see here. I've duplicated this image here and put them side by side so we can see the left and the right hand. Yes, the palm itself is on the square side, but also the fingertip. A square-handed person is someone with a square palm, but also at least two or more fingertips which are square. Now, Jupiter is certainly square, especially on the left hand, as is Saturn. The thumb is also on the squarish side as well. So we have a square hand. Now, square-handed people, you'll never find the texture of the skin in a square-handed person to be soft or silky. And this is because of their resilience, because of their need for action, because of the character as well. Square-handed people, much like Earth hand, this is certainly an Earth hand. We have obviously a square and short fingers, not the shortest of fingers, which leads to sort of slowness of processing of information, and his speech as well is probably slightly slower as well. He's the cool, calm, reserved type. But a square-handed person is someone who is highly methodical, highly practical. They are hard workers, they are logical, and they are highly loyal. They are, in fact, an exaggeration almost of an earth hand. They are, in some sense, the embodiment of common sense, especially with such a square-tipped. Actually, this is the right hand, isn't it? Jupiter. This is someone who their spiritual sort of rationale is highly black and white. This man has strong principles. He won't go back on them. As I say, very trustworthy, very loyal. This is certainly a person of truth. He's a deep. He's analytical. The second knots of his fingers are, they're quite knotty here, and this presents a more sort of analytical approach to his practical way of thinking. And his headline has an excellent curve here, and this shows high degree of intelligence. He's very creative. We've got a really well developed amount of Luna here. This is someone who wants to show his worth through his physicality. And Mercury is the finger of expression and communication. Those two go hand in hand. The way this person expresses themselves is through their physicality. Notice how you've got a slight knot here, and this actually represents it's a kink, and in some sense it's quite literal. The a high appreciation and a need to express through that physicality. This is a highly sexually charged person. But also notice how Mercury here tends to lean away. Although this chap, certainly a team player, there's no doubt about it. There's also a need here for, he doesn't like crowds at the same time. He's very close with those he knows, and he probably knows a great deal of people. He's as I say, a team player is kind of an obvious one. Of course, he works literally as part of a team. And I say it because Apollo and Saturn, they're close together. They're also leaning close together, and it shows. Although this person has their place, they chosen place in society is quite sort of rigid. There's no moving. He signs a contract and he's stuck in that one working position for however long. So in some sense, he's literally stuck. At the same time, Saturn and Apollo, they lean at the second, and this shows he's in some way quite happy that he's stuck in this position. As I say, a square hand is someone who thrives off structure, off order, routine, and being stuck is in some sense some sort of order. He's not the sort to want to go out shopping though amongst the crowds, and once he's finished his job, he will likely go home and enjoy the company of this is not an overly large amount of Venus. The lifeline doesn't swing too far out. I wouldn't have thought this as someone who has an overly large circle of friends. As I say, loyalty and trust are quite high up on the sort of values list for this person, and his principles are quite high. As a result, he probably has a select few uh, friends that he holds very dear, and really probably no need to expand this social network. Now, one thing I did pick up on, which I find quite interesting, is for a square hand, his ability to articulate his emotional um, emotions is quite strong, quite high. He's gifted in verbally expressing his emotions. So, although, as I have said, this is someone who is at the core strongest at communicating physically, he's also emotionally articulate and likely quite emotionally intelligent as well. We can see the heart line here, it rises up nicely, got a nice arc, it's got a nice depth, and it rises in between Jupiter and Saturn, the self and duty and honor. And you can actually see here the sort of the way fingers create a kind of a droplet shape, the fingertips here. Notice how it's quite pronounced here, and you can see by the shading of the shadow, and it provides an extra sort of sensitivity. And although this is certainly a square palm, there is a kind of conicness about it, and it again it shows this um, sensitivity. And I think that kind of provides a bit of an edge here because although he's very sort of straightforward and black and white and practical, in the squarish sort of sense, there is also the curvature of the headline as well. And as I say, the rounded kind of sensitivity here. There's elements here that show that he's able to balance his way of thinking. He's leavened by this ability to tap into creative reserves, which I think it adds this extra sort of responsiveness in the heat of the moment. Because actually, what I would be looking for in the classic kind of features of an athlete who requires the ability to think instantly, and react in the moment, are very rounded fingertips. Head and a lifeline that are completely separate, and this is a prerequisite. It's a requirement for sort of impulsiveness, acting without hesitancy. Impatience almost is a virtue for those who require need of speed. Interestingly, we don't see these sorts of things here, and I find that um, and it's interesting, as I say, and I think the reasons that he's able to act in the moment is this headline, is this imagination. It's because there's a great deal of intuition combined with practicality. Essentially, he's has a unique blend of logical practicality as well as instinct. And actually, these are two key qualities in a detective or in a palmist. It's important to have a degree of, fact-based, way of working, process-driven. to be logical, to work from the facts, and also to have a degree of instincts and intuition, gut feeling, hunches to work from those. And the reasons why I kind of draw on that is because um, I believe this man sees the playing field as his crime scene, so to speak. In some sense, he is figuring out what to do and how best to do it in the heat of the moment. He's using those instincts. And again, notice, these knots here, it provides this sort of analytical approach. And actually, I wouldn't find it somewhat unexpected to see the length of these fingers with someone who has to act so quickly. And actually, this is a bit of a misinterpretation. The length of the fingers certainly it creates a sort of slowness to a person's character more than their ability to think quickly. This is someone who overall processes their information quite slowly. So when it comes to complex scenarios, decisions, circumstances, they probably do take their time. But when it comes to having to react quickly, there's an aspect about them, an area, part of the brain that they tap into, and that is lunar. And we see that because of how well developed it is, and because of how the headline dropped down into it. It curves. It's a strong arc, it's a strong headline. It's still, overall, it's quite straight. It's on the straight side, but there's just enough of a curve here and it's long enough as well, but not too long so that they're overthinking, so that they're hesitant, because that actually would be an issue. It's just right. And notice where it stops. It stops on the Mercury line. And it shows that this person is highly connected with their instincts. The Mercury line is associated with intuition, with instinct. And this is why a Mercury line that bows is called a bow of intuition. It's connected with health as well. Now, the only other thing I know about this chap, I know he's 40 years old. Obviously, he's an American football star, he's an athlete. The only other thing I know is that he's type 1 diabetic. And in palmistry, you would see this, and I can't see it in these images, but I am going to I'm going to show how you can see these things. So type 2 diabetes, type 1 is probably different, and I'm not sure entirely how to determine this, but type 1 diabetes would be to find the find each apex of every mount and mark these. Now, if you find So I should mention that an apex is a skin ridge formation in the palms, and it's a sort of a triangular um, pattern, a formation of the skin ridges where they kind of converge and meet at a sort of junction, and you'll find them on the mounts of underneath every finger, and you'll also almost always, find one somewhere else, normally sort of down here or in the center of the palm. And I've just sort of plopped a little triangle here as a very rough example. So if you triangulate, if you like, from in between, if you mark the center of the apex under Jupiter and Mercury, and then find your apex low down. Normally it's on lower in the center of Lunar or Neptune, and you create a little triangle here like this. This is what it'll look like for most people, something like this anyway. If your apex is further over to the left and quite sort of high up, it'll be over here, and then your triangle will look more like an isosceles triangle. This is shows a predisposition towards type 2 diabetes. Also, those with a lot of loops, as in the fingertip the fingerprint pattern, the loop type, are also that combined with the sort of isosceles triangle will have a predisposition, a greater predisposition towards type 2 diabetes. Now, this chap has type 1. I don't know exactly how that differs for this person here, and really, to be honest, there's really very little in terms of studies that have been done, although medical science has confirmed that the skin ridge patterns, as in dermatoglyphics, is hereditary. So you'll find a lot of naysayers about palmistry saying, these are external factors that create the skin ridge patterns, that the palmar creases are caused by how we work and how we use our hands, and external forces at play that create these. Utter rubbish, utter nonsense, and medical science proves this. I mean, I'm not altogether too surprised. This chap is a square-handed person. It's very common to see square-handed people working in industries that require great routine. Bodybuilders are often square-handed people, um, bank managers, civil engineers, people in the military as well. It's a very earthy, quality, very down-to-earth qualities here. And certainly being an athlete ties in with that, that working out that regime, routine and order. Now, being having these high principles, being an idealist, and we can see that by his heart line rising up onto Jupiter here, it's likely, now looking at his career, it's likely, and it comes from the lifeline, which is very common with people who work in sort of very high energy roles. Just looking at the arc of the career, I'm looking at the left hand as well. Left hand is showing us his thoughts and feelings about where his career is going. And this is interesting. Hard to see because of the clarity in this image, but there appears to be a line. Um, depends on which way the direction of this line is as to what it means. But there's a line here connected to the lifeline that up onto potentially Mercury. Let's have a look at another image now. We were looking at the left hand. I've had a good look at these, and again, the quality here is pretty awful. I mean, it's good for the hand shape, but I can't see it. Now, if looking on the right hand to corroborate what I think this might be, because I can see some serious influence lines here, some worries, some stress, some great changes to all areas of the life, and quite often these are, at least one of these will be some sort of divorce. And it might be that's what this is. Forgive me. I don't entirely know. Can't be certain what that is. And that's only because these images are just so blurry. So I believe this is some sort of commonly associated with divorce. That is obviously if the person is married. This is some sort of breakups. In the left hand, can't see it in any images on the right hand, although I can't see it on any images on any other of his left hands either. So it might just be because of the way you can see it more clearly in this image, only because of the way he sort of curved his hand over a little bit and it's accentuated the crease. It shows, being the left hand, how much this hurt. It shows that although physically, practically speaking, materialistically, this wasn't, any sort of particular kind of hindrance. It didn't cause, there was no alimony, there was no prenup, there was no need to move a lot of things out or anything like that. Children weren't involved. Although none of that stuff happened necessarily, this is internally, this was really quite hard. This was very difficult breakup for him anyway. And where we see this on the lifeline is, it's hard to see because the angle of the hand, it looks about the age of 37, something like that. That's what it looks like anyway. So if you look very closely, the strength of the line is stronger from over here. So I'm assuming that it's coming from this way, and if that's the case, then it is, breakups, divorce. The the relationship coming from Mercury It's crashing down past the heart line. It's showing the disappointment, the hurt through the hairline. It's affecting his ability to function, make decisions, and literally affects his environment, his life, his way of life and living. So it affects all areas. This is a very impactful. Internally, this was a real struggle. Whereas, on the right hand, it it's not like an issue almost. It's, on the outside, externally, this didn't seem to, he's probably put on a brave face. Essentially, that's what's happening, and this is that kind of practicality. He's sort of drawing on this sort of, no, I'm just going to get up and carry on approach. So, just looking at the fate line, I re-digress here. It's curious because around about the age of, I don't know, 17, 18 or so, we've got this build up here of a secondary kind of fate here, destiny, a path in life, and it's this one that, that there's it's strong for a while. At least these, bear with me, the images here are awful. It becomes weaker, and then it strengthens up again, and this kind of suggests that there was disappointment around what he was expecting, what he wanted. It happened in the end. Um, and then, from sort of 25 onwards, things are looking very strong, right up until the age of 35. And then it's everything kind of, becomes a lot weaker again. I'm at a bit of a loss here. I can only assume that a series of bad decisions, um, has in some way impacted his career. And it's not over essentially, but things aren't as profitable. It's not as enjoyable. It's not as productive. He's not on top of his game after the age of 35 or so, it seems. Um, I'm not entirely certain what's going on here, but you can see a slight sort of turn towards Apollo as it reaches the heart line. And from there, there's not a great deal. There's, I was expecting to see some sort of turn towards Jupiter, coaching, perhaps teaching, being some sort of a role model, setting the standards by which he's lived by for so long. But I don't see that. What I do see is that the sun line from the age of probably about 57 or so, maybe 58, it looks really strong. So whatever happens from now, where he is in his life now, which is about the age of here, right up to here, it's stagnant for some reason, and I can only assume that it's a series of choices that sort of led him to this. However, things are going to look up, and it does look as though there's there's happiness and then there's money, and that the two are tied. There's a V shape here on Apollo, and this is a really positive sign. Um, so there's a kind of delayed prosperity here for whatever reason. It's not to say that he won't be without money, because he will be. He's got money. It's just there isn't that kind of job satisfaction until the age of around about 57, it seems, 58, 57, something like that. So I do think that he will. There's still a job there's still, being that the fate line, the career line, still turns towards Apollo. It's still reaching upwards this way, this form of working towards his talents, and it's also reaching towards Mercury as well. This physical need to express himself, which is just what he's so good at. Um, I do think that there is still a job here in that, but I don't think it's quite in the same way. So, in some way, at the age of 57, he's going to slip back into a role that really suits his needs. Until then, I think he's likely going to be working in something that he's not quite all that happy in. Now, obviously these images are not great, but one thing that is of note is this Mars line. Mars is our need to fight, it's our drive to tackle the obstacles ahead of us. And these are these tiny little lines that kind of cut through these. These are all literally breaks. They are repairs made to physicality. They are signs that this person has been injured and repaired from these injuries. And look at just how many injuries this man has had. And the last one you can see here, this is quite literally a track record of his medical history. Fascinating. And you wouldn't normally see this kind of this sort of uh, clarity in a person's kind of physical um, track record in a person's palms. But because we're dealing with someone who's so physically orientated, this is clear. It's about one of the only things I can get in terms of clarity, and really you can see here the very last need for the Mars line, and that is at the age of round about 42-ish. So I believe this man will be working in his career up until, well, for another 2 more years. I don't think he will be um, a football player after the age of 42. That's my prediction here. um, you can see the mild sort of trailing off and touching the lifeline, and it's kind of rounding off. It's finishing up this need to fight, to persevere, to preserve the vitality, the constitution of this person, and that's represented by the lifeline itself. You can see, notice you've got the Mercury line here. It becomes quite faint, and it doubles just before it becomes faint, and it drifts upwards towards Mercury here, but also it triples before it crosses this headline. It triples. So for a short time, you have a tripling of the Mercury line at the very least, and it shows a highly um, physically health conscious person. This is certainly someone who really watches what they eat, and the things he puts into his body. He's probably highly conscious in terms of pharmaceuticals. He may well be someone who looked at alternative medicine. I believe he has a potential hereditary heart issue here, lung issue here. The larger the hands, the larger the heart, the greater the strain on the heart. This man certainly has incredibly large, hands and an incredibly large heart. And so, after a certain age, after the age of 40, in fact, statistically, um, men with this sort of width of hand, have a greater width of the shoulders, and a greater chance of cardiac issues. So it's being that he's already got a hereditary heart issue anyway. It's extremely important that he looks after his health after, well, the age that he is at right now. So I think I'm gonna call it there, and I want to know what people's thoughts are. Perhaps you, like me, have no idea, you know, about this guy or about American football. I don't particularly have any interest in it, but it has been interesting to read the palms of a very physically active person. And a final note here, I can see one potential child here on the family ring. So there we go. That's my palm reading for Aaron Rodgers. Let me know what your thoughts are. Perhaps you've seen something here that I haven't picked up on. Perhaps, I've said something that's completely wrong. Let me know, and I'll be happy to comment. So, see you on the next one. Please subscribe.